Okay, quick video on tariffs here. What the hell is going on? First, let's cover refunds. There's a lot of pessimism about whether tariff refunds for monies collected under the IEEPA tariffs that were just shot down will be paid out anytime soon. I think they will for a couple reasons. The Court for International Trade struck down Trump's ability to levy tariffs under IEEPA. The Trump administration appealed that to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court denied the appeal. They upheld the ruling, as is the norm in these cases. They then just kick it back to the lower court to determine the appropriate remedy. In this case, logically, that seems like refunds. The Trump administration itself has acknowledged that refunds would be likely in the case that they had lost, which they now have. And the government knows who paid these tariffs. It can't be that difficult. People are saying the Trump administration might fight refunds. No way. Now that the case is a lost cause, it's in the Trump administration's interest to just get that money out the door and pump it into the economy. That's what they will want to do. So I think the Court for International Trade will probably rule, I don't know, in weeks or months. And by the second half of this year, it'll become apparent that some $175 billion, about 50 basis points of GDP, is getting pumped back into the U.S. economy. Now, what's going on with Trump and 10% and 15%? And here's what I think happened. The status quo before Friday was that about 30% of U.S. imports were tariffed under Section 232, which is national security, things like steel, autos, aluminum, copper, things that the administration argues we need to make here for national security purposes. Also includes semiconductors. Now, this is interesting. There's an open 232 on semiconductors, but and that also includes cell phone components, all kinds of electronics. Huge category of U.S. imports, particularly from China. And those are currently at a zero tariff because the 232 on semiconductors is stuck in limbo because of this truce we have with China. So those are actually tariffed at zero right now. So we had these 232s on all these national security items, and then reciprocal tariffs under IEEPA on everything else. So call it 70% of U.S. imports, to use round numbers. Those IEEPA tariffs range from 15 to 20%, 15 on the EU, Japan, South Korea, 20% on China and most of Southeast Asia. But they did not stack with the 232s. They were separate pools of tariffs. And then when Trump announced he was going with 10% new tariff under Section 122 on Friday, he described it as over and above the existing tariff. So people jumped to the conclusion that the new 10% was going to be on top of the 232s. That never would have made sense because the 232 levies on autos were a key component of the deals with the EU, Japan, South Korea. They were very upset about that. They negotiated very hard to get a limit on those tariffs. If Trump had just stuck another 10% on autos from those places, it would have thrown a spanner in the work of all those trade deals. So that was never going to happen. So as of Friday, it looked like he replaced this 15 to 20% IEEPA levies on 70% of imports with a 10% levy on 70% of imports, which looked a lot like a tariff cut. Well, he changed his mind on Saturday and replaced those 15 to 20% tariffs with now a 15% tariff to more closely replicate the situation we had in place beforehand. I can only surmise what happened is that somebody, Jamison Greer or others, tried to sneak a tariff cut past the president. Clearly, Plan B wasn't sufficiently flushed out and approved by the president because he put Plan B in motion on Friday and then realized on Saturday he had cut tariffs, decided he didn't want to, and changed his mind. So I think somebody tried to get a little tariff cut, whether it's Bessent or Greer or Lutnick or the three of them in cahoots, I don't know. Sort of sneak a tariff cut past the president, goose equity markets a little bit, goose the economy into the midterms. The president figured it out on Saturday and said, what the hell's this? I didn't want to cut tariffs, and went to 15%. So we end up with a tariff structure that very closely resembles what we had before. This will be only for 150 days under Section 122, but they'll roll out 301 investigations that'll make that more permanent and probably put the cases where the IEEPA tariffs were 20 back to 20. So we're going to end up with the same tariff structure, no tariff cut. But again, a piece of evidence that this administration is a bit unique in how it operates and maybe not all that well organized at times.